Wow, thank you so much. It's great to be here. John, thank you so much for that, and Peter for those nice remarks. Congresswoman Margolis is here tonight. Marjorie, thank you so much for coming. And Governor Rendell. I was 17 when I worked for then District Attorney Rendell. And the only thing I achieved as an intern in his campaign, this is the only campaign I know of that he didn't win, which is not my fault, when he ran against the incumbent mayor in '87. And the only thing I remember actually achieving was I wrote a letter to the Philadelphia Inquirer about how Wilson Goode clearly cannot run this city. And it got published. Somebody's hissing that? Okay, well, I'm sorry if Wilson Goode is here. I didn't mean to offend anybody. Wilson Goode's not here? In any case, I've lost half the room already. I haven't even started with my remarks. My only point is that's all I achieved. I'm just gonna stick to what I have here now. Okay. Who else do I have to thank? CNN commentator Michael Nutter is here. Mayor Nutter. Thank you so much. He's the one that called me and asked me. Senator Casey is here. Not from Philadelphia, but he is from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Julie Coker-Graham, Kathy Spencer, Zabet, Tilak Singh, Melissa Stevens, members of the Philadelphia World Heritage Team, fellow Philadelphians. Thank you so much for letting me come and speak to you tonight. And the Philly fanatic, wherever you are, that was nice. He gave me a Phillies hat that was so big, I can't imagine what size head he thought I had. It was so loose. I realize people in television have reputations for having big heads, but that was like a mummer's float. So obviously it was great news, and when in 2015 Philadelphia became the first U.S. municipality to gain the elite title of World Heritage City, joining such elite cities as Prague and Jerusalem and Paris and Florence. I would note that New York City is not a World Heritage City. I would note that if I were the kind of person that made observations like that, which I am not, just like I'm not the kind of person that would observe that our sports teams don't cheat. In reference to Governor Rendell brought up Boston earlier. It's great to know that it's not just the Patriots that cheat. It's a city tradition. Philadelphia obviously is the birthplace of not just the first public library or post office or bank, not just the site of the First and Second Continental Congress. It is the birthplace of democracy in this country. It is the birthplace of liberty in this country. These are values that should be honored. A few people tonight asked me where I was from, and I was so happy that they couldn't hear the hoagie in my voice. Obviously, the years of elocution lessons have done their trick. You really can't tell that I'm from Philly? That's all I hear when I watch. And now we're going down the shore. But I am from Philadelphia. The first few months of my life were spent in Staten Island through no fault of my own. But my father, mother, and I moved to 2nd and Carpenter in the summer of 1969. My father is here tonight. He's a pediatrician. He practices with South Philadelphia Pediatrics. And he's an associate clinical professor of pediatrics at Jefferson Medical College. My mother is a pediatric nurse, and she worked at Children's Seashore House at CHOP, and then as a psychiatric nurse at the Philadelphia VA. She's here tonight as well. I went to the YMYWHA on what is it, on Market Street it was at the time? Broad Street? Okay, on Broad Street, right, okay, Broad Street. My brother was at the YMCA on Market Street, that's why I got confused. I went to the Society Hill School for Music and Art. Does that still exist? No. The Philadelphia School, 25th and Lombard? Okay. and Akiba Hebrew Academy, which was in Marion and called Akiba Hebrew Academy when I went there. And for, of course, my senior internship in high school, I worked for that guy, Mr. Rendell. Now, you might find amusing the circumstances of my childhood because actually this became newsworthy on the alt-right a few weeks ago. I was talking on State of the Union on Sunday during his rather brief tenure with White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. It was 10 days, but I got him. And he was talking about the folks from his neighborhood in Long Island who had hopes for President Trump, and I noted kind of just offhandedly that I came from a similar neighborhood. Now, to be fair, I think Scaramucci's hometown in Long Island was a lot tonier than Queen Village in the 70s, for anybody who experienced Queen Village in the 70s. But, you know, I was trying to establish a common bond. So, because I'm with the media, an alt-right website suggested that there was absolutely no way I could have grown up in a neighborhood similar to Anthony Scaramucci's. I was a big phony. They noted that my father attended Dartmouth and Harvard Medical School. They didn't note that he did so on scholarship. It was a rather interesting experience seeing somebody who had never been in Queen Village describe what Queen Village was like to the rest of the world. Now, to be clear, I'm not a working class guy. I was raised in a very privileged life because of the hard work of my mom and my dad. But anybody live in Philadelphia in the 70s? Anybody remember Queen Village in the 70s? Southwark Housing Project? Shot Tower? The Hi-Hat Bar? You remember the Hi-Hat Bar in the corner of? Yeah, I'll bet you do. Suddenly that soda tax makes a lot more sense. Anyway, so my mom was reading this on this alt-right website that has pretty close ties to the White House, or it did until a couple weeks ago. And my mom's so adorable. She reads this and then she calls me. She goes, "There were so many inaccuracies." I'm like, yeah, that was the point. Since I started writing these remarks a week ago, two other hit pieces have come out against me. Another one from the same alt-right website, accusing me of lying because I noted that the president had once made fun of a disabled reporter, which remembers that reminded me of the old joke of who are you going to believe me? Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And then there was another one on the left today, which was interesting. It said, the headline of it, written by a very pro-Assad and pro-Putin reporter, CNN's Jake Tapper is taking the nation to war. Google that when you get home, it'll come up. CNN's Jake Tapper is taking the nation to war. I can't even get them to get my order right at Starbucks. And I'm taking the nation to war. Meet my kids and tell me I'm taking the nation to war. French writer Jean-Pierre Fay, I believe, is the one that came up with the horseshoe theory of American politics, that the political continuum is not one linear thread, but in fact it more closely resembles a horseshoe where the far right and the far left almost come together and closely resemble each other. And we're seeing that in these political realignments, not just against me, but the far right and the far left making common cause and having a louder voice in being able to do so because of the internet and other factors on issues like Syria or Russia and trade. It's been an odd time to be in journalism, and not just because of this realignment. Today, the Emir of Kuwait visited the White House and held an event with President Trump. And they had a little bonding moment. I don't know how many people saw this or speak Arabic. And they had a little moment because the Emir of Kuwait was complaining about the media. And President Trump said that he was very happy to know that you have problems with the media also. Yeah, in Kuwait, they actually throw them in jail and kick them out of the country, so it's a little different. But it is, I feel like we're all getting used to this, and I don't want us to get used to it, because the United States is supposed to stand for freedoms and not provide comfort to people who deny their people these freedoms. President Trump obviously has labeled any story containing news he does not like to be fake news, which is a neat trick when you think about it. He tweeted in February, and this is a quote, "Any negative polls are fake news." I mean, you gotta admire it in a way. Try it, Mr. Mayor. Try it with your staff next time. Any negative polls are fake news. Now, most Americans, obviously, according to polls, are not buying this general approach to governing. A recent Fox News poll had 56% saying that they feel that President Trump is tearing the country apart. But the same poll showed 40% of Americans feel that reporters, journalists, represent a greater threat to the country than do white supremacists. And of those individuals who voted for Donald Trump, 75% say that journalists are a bigger threat to the United States than are white supremacists. This poll was taken after Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville. It's not a coincidence that many journalists now have to travel with security. The most powerful man in the world constantly calls us fake, liars, unpatriotic, loathsome, and evil people. And it's echoed among his conservative media friends. But I have to say, it's not a time for journalists to be dispirited. It's a time for journalists to be encouraged. It's a time of celebration. People are engaged in politics like they haven't been in quite some time. Journalists are rising to the challenge, providing great stories in the newspapers, compelling broadcast television programs. And let me add, the Philadelphia Inquirer went behind a paywall this week. Sign up for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Sign up for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Even if you think you're doing it for charity, support your local newspapers. I'm not joking. Support your local newspapers. That is a great newspaper, and it should be supported by this city. But there is another point I want to make about President Trump, and I think it's a point that gets lost too often because too many people are too worried, and they see things that disturb them. The mayor spoke about one of them earlier when it came to DACA and deportations. And that is, the president is not always wrong. He's not always incorrect. And I fear that this message gets lost because of the messenger. Is President Trump wrong, for instance, when he suggests that too often in the last few decades, the people negotiating our trade deals have been more focused on corporations' bottom lines and stock tickers than on the working men and women of, say, Conshohocken? Has he always been wrong about that? I recognize that this is a global event. And I heard some upsetting stories from somebody from one of our great local universities here in Philadelphia talking about how international students are not coming this year because they are scared of the climate in this country. And that is upsetting and that is disturbing. And we can't ignore that tone. But does anybody else remember these headlines? I'm going to read you some headlines from the Philadelphia Inquirer. How the game was rigged against the middle class. How special interests have their way with Congress. Why the world is closing in on the U.S. economy. After 3 decades, American worker loses out to Mexico. These are not Donald Trump's position papers. He didn't really have position papers, to be completely frank, but these are the headlines from Donald Bartlett and James Steele's award-winning series from the Philadelphia Inquirer in October 1991, America, What Went Wrong. Does anybody else remember that series? An amazing series. It's still on the internet. And it's not as if things got better for the average American worker since 1991. And I recognize that container ships and automation and the World Wide Web have at least as much to do with job losses as most favored nation status for China. But President Trump is not wrong when he says too often people in Washington, D.C. have forgotten the men and women of the nation. Especially the men and women who never get to experience a night like the one we're having tonight and probably take for granted. When President Eisenhower spoke at Dartmouth in 1953, he told the students not to burn books. This was during the Red Scare. Don't think you're going to conceal faults by concealing evidence that they ever existed. How will we defeat communism, Eisenhower asked, unless we know what it is and what it teaches, and why does it have such appeal for men? Why are so many people swearing allegiance to it? And I'm not comparing Trumpism with communism at all, but he was talking about a battle place of ideas. And when I hear from liberals or Democrats or progressives, why are you booking this Trump person on your show? Why are you interviewing that Republican? Why are you covering Donald Trump on this issue in a serious way? I ask them, how are you going to win an election against Trumpism if you don't even understand how he became president? It's important for people in the media to stand up for what is right, for what is true, for facts and human decency. But it is also important for people in the media to try to understand why 62,979,636 Americans voted for Donald Trump, including the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for the first time since I was 19. When I came to Philly last summer for the Democratic Convention, I visited some of my favorite haunts. At Termini Brothers, did I hear a yay? Philadelphia should be a heritage city just for the cannoli at Termini Brothers. Can I say that? Florence. So at Termini Brothers, I asked Vincent Termini, the third generation, I think, owner of the store, what he heard about the election from his customers. And he said he'd noticed a phenomenon of leaners. And I said, leaners? And he goes, yeah, they lean in. They say, I think I might vote for Donald Trump. Vincent Termini saw something that a lot of pundits did not see. And yes, I get it. Philadelphia went 90% for Hillary. But Donald Trump won 3 wards in Philadelphia. Mitt Romney won none. Donald Trump won Ward 26 in South Philly and 2 in North Philly. I don't pay as much attention to North Philly, I'm sorry. I'm from Queen Village. I've also been thinking a lot about a different Philadelphia publication, the Pennsylvania Journal, December 23rd, 1776. The author, Thomas Paine. The Pennsylvania Journal, incidentally, was published by a guy named William Bradford. He also ran the London Coffee House at Front and Market. And Mr. Bradford is currently on Arch Street at the Presbyterian Cemetery. Oddly, and this is kind of a digression, but I couldn't believe it when I was writing the speech, Thomas Paine's body is like all over the world. Does anybody know this? Really strange. Different speech, different time. Anyway, Thomas Paine wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. These are the times that try men's souls." Kind of feels resonant today. A lot of people I know find their souls tried these days. And it is understandable. It is a time when we find attacks not just on issues and values that we care about, but on our very system of checks and balances in many ways, on the judiciary branch and judges, on the legislative branch, on the heroism of a former POW, on the dignity and respect of somebody with a severe disability who goes out every day and works the same way anybody else would. The free press. Things that people in this city almost 250 years ago fought and worked hard to make iconic, to make part of who we are as a nation. it is a time when it feels like these things that we value, truth, decency, respect, are under attack and in some cases eroding before our eyes. And when it comes to protecting that which we love and care for so dearly, this is not a time for the summer soldier. It's not a time for weak interviewers. It's not a time for sunshine patriots. It's not a time for politicians to be retreating behind doublespeak. It's a time for all of us to stand up for what is right. But let us not define what is right by individuals or behaviors we oppose. Let us define what is right by fundamental principles of fairness and justice. And that includes fairness to the president and to people who support the president. If you're like most Philadelphians, you've never spent any time looking at the Liberty Bell. I went once. But one thing I remember learning about the Liberty Bell is that it was built in the 1750s, and it was only after almost a century of use that it developed that crack. And it was a very thin crack. They were preparing to commemorate George Washington's birthday, and the metalworkers tried to fix the bell, and they widened the crack. It's a technique called stop drilling that I know absolutely nothing about except that I just told you what it is. The crack is thick because they were trying to fix it. It didn't work and another crack developed. As in that bell, there are deep fissures in this nation. But this bell and this nation are about more than just harmony. We're about divisions. We're about functioning regardless of those divisions. The Liberty Bell's inscription is from Leviticus. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. All the inhabitants, not just the ones with whom we agree. Thank you so much for this honor. It's great to be back in the magnificent city of brotherly love.